Today, Frankie Montas has his press conference, quote unquote. The Mets make a signing in the minor league system. And speaking of minor leagues, what's going on, Brett Baty? We're getting offers for the third baseman. We're breaking all of that down on this weekend edition of Mets Digest. What's going on, everybody? My name is Flobo Boyce, and thank you so much for rocking with me. The Mets are finally doing other things besides going themselves in the part of the Juan Soto sweepstakes. So I'm so happy to be able to break that down for you on this particular edition. Myself, alongside Mike D'Angelo, we work tirelessly to give you the news and notes you so need. So if you're down with the orange and blue, hit us with a like, comment, subscribe, share, all that jazz. I read the comments. I appreciate the likes, but you don't want to be in that 78% or 78.6% of people who are watching the content and are not subscribed. So do me a favor, hit that subscribe button. But let's get into it because your time is valuable. I know we have the weekend to get into, but Frankie Montas, who was the hot swap for Luis Severino this week. If you guys didn't know by now, Luis Severino is headed over to the Athletics of no town in particular. But Frankie had his press conference. Now, in my intro, I laughed a bit because it wasn't this big fanfare. It wasn't in the lobby of some hotel. It wasn't on a rooftop or anything. It was a Zoom call, just taking you back to that pandemic vibes. This stuff was informative. Frankie was online for about 15 minutes or so, a little less, answering questions to and fro, but it seems to me that he's excited to get himself a part of Queens. Thank you so much to John Flanagan over at NYTV, even though I was in the chat where it happened, being able to copy and paste that transliterations is pretty appreciated. But check us out. He really goes into the what Montes was going on to when talking about his prospects for next year. He says, quote, coming off an up-and-coming down campaign, the hope is that New York's pitching lab will be able to help turn things around, much like Severino, and regain some of that upside he once showed, just as they did with Luis Severino and Sean Manaea last season. Keep that in mind, and Sean Manaea. That's exactly why the righty reached out to both Manaea and Severino before officially putting pen to paper. Quote, this is from Frankie, this is a true story. He says, they had nothing but good things to say about the way they do things. All the resources they have to take your game to the next level. I got to see a little bit of it when I was in New York the past couple of days. The way they do things, the way they prepare guys, the way they help with your recovery, all of the resources have to improve your game. I'm definitely excited for the next year to see how they can help me improve. And, well, as a long-term fan of the New York Mets, the first thing I said was, is he talking about us? There was a time where we all thought we ruined pitchers, am I right? Like, we got lucky when the days of R.A. Dickey brought the knuckleball back, but that says a lot about whatever the magical, mythical pitching lab and what that means, but rather that a pitcher's willing to come here. Now, I'm not trying to say Frankie Montas is going to be the archetypical pitcher that comes over here because of that, but that says a lot, that a pitcher who has experience, who is a veteran, was willing to accept a short-term deal, but knows the upside, that they can take information, they can take perspective into the back half of their careers, even if they decide to stay, like we hope Montas does, or decides to move on like Severino does. It says a lot about how we're pushing things forward. Or you take on a team in sports. I'm not sure if you're into those documentaries on Netflix. I'm not sure if you watch Wrexham on Hulu, but there's a lot than just winning games that especially you have to do when it's in disarray. And you and I can all agree when the Wilpons owned the team, there was some functional disarray for the team. But the thing is about the Manaea situation is it became a running through line in that press conference / Zoom call because he had mentioned, Frankie Montas, that Sean Manaea was one of his bestest buds. And so a lot of wheels got turning about whether or not Sean Manaea would be the one to resign. And floating over or skirting over that idea, Montas had pretty much this to say. Again, thanks to John Flanagan for the transliteration. The 31-year-old called Manaea, quote, one of his best friends in the game from the early days together with the Oakland Athletics. By the way, the Oakland Athletics need to be in Oakland, but that's just me editorializing. Quote, he is one of the guys I look up to, Montas said. He helped me a lot when I was in Oakland. I was very close with him. I wish him nothing but the best. I hope he can sign with us. I love that he's us, because he would be a guy who would help this team get to the promised land. I want to put my my money in my mouth is if Sean Manaea signs, I gotta buy a Sean Manaea jersey. Let me know in the comments below. Should I go with the road grays? Should I go with the blues or the pinstripes? Now, if Sean signs elsewhere, I'll be devastated. But I thought it was pretty cool that Montas still looks up to Sean Manaea and still has hope that he would sign, especially now with Severino gone. I am hoping that even if you bring in more arms and more pitchers, that you're able to build something alongside our tribal chief. And yes, that's right. I said it. He is my tribal chief. Throw up the ones. So, yeah, the full press conference in its entirety, it's available on both the SNY YouTube and the New York Mets official YouTube. Make sure you check it out at length. But it really was a optimistic feeling across the board. Elsewhere in Mets land today, there is another minor league signing. This one is from Edward Olivares over there with as recently as a Pirates organization. Played a couple games, an outfielder by trade, and is going to put themselves in that outfielder mix. The reason being is that we really don't know what our outfield is going to be. So again, props to David Stearns and company for that depth part, because again, we don't know if it's going to be promoting some of our guys we have there. We don't know if it's going to be a Sad Santander situation, and of course we don't know if Juan Soto is going to be in the mix, but you always want to have yourself in a good position for depth to have a next man up. And the problems I was seeing from us in AAA, our AAA team wasn't nearly as strong, and so when people came up from AAA, it was kind of a hard jump. So getting individuals that are down to clown is always a good thing. Let's take a look at some of the stat lines. Again, nothing going to be blockbuster, nothing epic there, but with a 291 on base percentage, kind of laughable on paper. But the idea is that you want to have people who are capable and give them a chance at the worst possible scenario that you go ahead there for spring training or anything like that to get themselves a chance to be on the team. So, shout out to Edward Olivares. Again, the Mets are making moves in the offseason. The hot stove is moving, which is great. That shows the team is willing to make deals independent of Juan Soto. I am not sure if they're going to do anything that would be bigger, like the Pete Alonso deal or the Sean Manaea deal, until Soto is solved, because the Juan Soto situation, moving on to our final story of the evening, the Juan Soto situation can do a really big ripple effect when it comes to what the team looks like. If the team somehow acquires Juan Soto, will we have, on theory, enough juice or leverage to get a Pete Alonso? And if Pete Alonso doesn't stay, what happens to our infield? People always say, hey, move Vientos over. What does that mean for our third base situation? And so this one here is pretty interesting. Brett Baty, who was the incumbent third baseman at the beginning for 2024 seasons, now hearing offers from other teams as part of trade deals and part of signings, and that's something that's to be expected. You have someone who's good, you have someone that seems that's not getting playing time, of course other teams would come calling, especially, as I said before, that jump, that gap of skill between AAA and the major leagues is getting bigger and bigger season by season. I think teams are noticing that, and they're trying to mitigate that. So what does that say for Brett, though? Will he be trade bait? I don't know. The New York Post actually goes into this. Shout out to Jason Scenes for going into detail. Says the Mets have a third baseman for the foreseeable future in Mark Vientos, because again, Mark Vientos hits for power. But if Alonso were to leave that would open the possibility of shifting Vientos to first base. Really big if. We want Pete to come back, at least I do, but you really can't guarantee people will come back. With Baty and perhaps Ronnie Mauricio in the mix at third base, and if Alonso stays, then it's hard to envision a future for which the Mets and 25-year-old Baty. Now, just for context, not to drag Baty, but 25-year-old seems young for him, but he's 1 year younger than Juan Soto, who's already been cemented as being the franchise. And so maybe we should really reassess where we think Brett Baty should be at this point of his career. Who won the starting base job last season in spring training, only to relinquish it after struggling in mid-May. So let's take a look at that mix right now, because barring a free agent signing, because I know there's talks about Carlos Correa, I know there's talks about other third basemen being from the veteran side, being in that hot corner. The Mets have options, right? There is Mark Vientos right now, the incumbent, the new incumbent, who sure can hit from power and has shown he can deal in high leverage situations. Then you have Ronnie Mauricio. We don't really know how his recovery is going to be, but on paper, that's a Blase was a faster player than Brett Baty, and I would argue a bit more athletic as well. Jose Iglesias, who is currently a free agent, but he hadn't signed with another team yet, so for all intents and purposes, let's consider him a Met just for this exercise, can also play third base and had spent time in third base. It looks more than ever that Brett Baty would be the odd man out. And if you're the Mets, what do? Do you keep them as a depth option? Do you say, hey, look, in case somebody goes down, you're the next man up? Or do you say, hey, look, we got Mauricio, we got Vientos kind of, sort of, especially if Pete Alonso stays around. We may have Iglesias, we may re-sign him if we do. He may be there, maybe another prospect altogether, infielder we could probably mess around with. Do we even try to hold on to everything? And then the idea of holding on to everything is you kind of lock yourself out of potential trades. And so that to me was very, very curious about what happens with Brett Baty. Now, for me, I was the Vientos guy from day one. Not to gloat, I have to say that I'm right, but you never know. And what happens if the opposite happens next season? Let's say you trade Brett Baty and then Vientos has a aggressive year. I don't want it. Nobody does, but you got to think about that if you're the front office. Question I asked for you this far, besides which color jersey I should get my Sean Manaea jersey if he resigns, is you are the GM. You have so many options at third base. Assuming we re-sign Pete Alonso, it's a big if, who would you put in that third base? Would you re-sign Iglesias? Would you bring up Brett Baty? Would you keep Vientos in a hot corner? Let me know, because that's going to be one of the big question marks, an embarrassment of riches if you're David Stearns and company. Wow, what a jam-packed edition of Mets Digest. I'm so glad more things are happening, and this hot stove is heating up. My name is Flobo Boyce. Thanks for rocking with me during this time. Again, I read the comments, positive, negative, everything in between. I'll be back next time with more content you'll love. And of course, until next time, it's LGM to the bitter end.